Hi, Dan Stein, author of the blog BIM Chapters and several textbooks on Revit. Here's a couple of examples you might want to check out over at SDCPublications.com. I'm currently in the process of updating those books for the topic at hand, which is the release of Revit 2024 that just came out. We'll look at several of the new platform and architecture discipline specific features in this video. We'll look at the topo surface command, the ability to schedule revisions, a new visual style called textures that I was actually in the beta for on the customer side with Autodesk, which is really cool, as well as another feature on creating an early energy analysis model, limiting it to just the elements in the current view. So sit back, let's check out some of these features together, share your comments below, and subscribe if you want to continue to get updates, and be sure to check out my shared coordinate series here on this YouTube channel. One of the first new things you'll notice in this version of Revit are the sample files that are right here on the recent files page. I'll go ahead and get the sample architectural model open, but you can see to the right there are linked files for structural, MEP, HVAC, plumbing. One of the things that's a bit unfortunate is the old sample files are gone. So for troubleshooting or demo purposes, we no longer have the simple residential project available. Speaking of sample files, if I go to File, Open, this has been here for a long time, but here's a shortcut to get to the sample files folder. And so here are the sample files. There's actually a couple other really interesting sample files like this German sample file. Some of the family examples are still there. Here are the new sample files that link together. And then there's yet another sample file here that you can explore. So from what I understand, this new sample file is based on a real site. There's even a laser scan that you can optionally download that goes with this data set. So there's instructions here on how to link the files together. There's also a note here to go to sheet G001 to learn more about the project. So if we go have a look at that just for a moment. There's a list here of topics and what you can do with this file. Some background information, some of the features that are showcased. Things like design options and phasing are all in this file. Let's go to a 3D view and have a quick look. So you can see it's a quite nice file, and this will also be great for demos and troubleshooting. It's just a little bigger file, takes a little longer to open. You can see all the links are found because they're relative links. So if the files stay where they are when they're installed in Revit 2024, they should all link together just fine. We'll have a look at a few of the schedules. So there's two categories here, working schedules and typical schedules. So there's a door schedule, a planting schedule, a sheet schedule. So a very sophisticated project that'll be great for demos and learning Revit. Another thing that's new in terms of files that are installed with Revit 2024 is that there's a new template file. If we go to New under Models, we'll see there's an imperial and a metric multidiscipline template. All the other templates are still available under Browse. So here's the traditional default, commercial, the construction one that you should never use that I wrote a blog post about because it has odd setup of phasing. At least for architects, you shouldn't use this. And then there's also the residential. I'm going to go ahead and open the Imperial Multidiscipline. That was the default. And the thing that's unique about this, in the past there were only discipline specific templates, which some of the Revit features and workflows require certain settings and loaded families to exist. For example, structural. If we go to the Manage tab and Structural Settings, there's a lot of settings here And then there are also families that can be preloaded that are selected within these settings. So if you don't have these settings in families and then you try and use a specific structural command, the command either would fail or just not give proper results. So now this file has views and content loaded that would facilitate a multidiscipline Revit model. So in practicality, there's not many people using a multidiscipline Revit model, but in terms of academic or demonstration purposes, this is a really great file to have. So a quick look at the project browser, and you'll see there's architectural floor plans, coordination, electrical, mechanical, plumbing. We can expand it and see there's a first floor and a second floor for all these views. And then there's also a full set of sheets that go with this. If we go to the component tool and click the drop down, you'll see here's some of these fittings and things that you need for piping to work right, even at the basic level, in addition to the architectural trees. And so there's quite a list of things here that are in here to support a multidiscipline workflow in this demonstration file. If we have a look at the text command, you'll see that one thing that's unique in this template file is the font type has changed. So again, the other sample files are still there, and as far as I know, nothing has changed about those. And all of those are just typically used for samples and demonstration purposes anyways. They will have no effect on your company's template file if you happen to have one. Before we dig into the new features, let's take a quick look at Revit's refreshed interface. I'm going to open up the Imperial Multidiscipline template file, and right away you'll notice that there's a whole new set of icons that have been created. This was done in part in support of the new dark theme mode that you can get to by going to File, Options. Within Options, the light theme, dark theme used to be at the bottom of the user interface. Now it's on the Colors tab. So if we select, by default it's set to, I believe, use system setting. I have mine set to light, and then I'll set it to dark. So use system setting would be if Windows itself is set to dark theme mode. So I'll hit OK, and this just makes everything dark. And all the first level dialogues or palettes are dark. But as soon as you start opening up sub-dialogues and palettes, those are not dark. I assume that they'll work on those in a future release. One thing you'll notice is that the canvas is also dark. And if you don't want that, that can be adjusted separately. So File, Options, back to Colors, and then down here under the Canvas color scheme, this can be set to light. So I'll quickly set that back to light. The next thing that, well, actually I'll finish looking at the ribbon. So there's some new icons. We'll talk more about this later on in this video, but on the Massing and Site tab, there's some really big changes, and one new command, the Topo Solid, that replaces the Topo Surface command. Other than that, you can just have a quick look at some of the new icons and what they look like. Now I'll move on down to the project browser, which has been completely redone in Revit 2024. So you can see that the plus and minus symbols look different. One of the big functional things that's different is at the top there's a search option. Previously there was a search option in the right click, but with it being at the top here, it actually is more interactive and contextual. So if I started typing the word plan, for example, you can see it's automatically filtering and highlighting below as you type. So that's really helpful. And then if I find something here that's a little bit more specific, there will be less options like site. You can see it filters everything down. You can backspace, or you could click the little X to cancel your search. Positioning the palettes is still similar as before. So I put that back where it was. Two other quick things in the context of user interface. There are a number of new dialog boxes that are stretchable. So if we go into IDs of selection, this dialog box is stretchable where it wasn't previously able to be stretched, and this often has a lot of information that's hard to see. So there's over 20 dialog boxes that previously were not adjustable that are now. And then the last thing I'll show quickly in this section, in options, not really a user interface thing, but by default under macros, everything here is disabled, and either in a deployment or as an end user, these could be adjusted to be enabled. Now I want to share 3 of my favorite new features in Revit 2024. The first one has to do with the early energy modeling workflow, either going from Revit to Insight or Revit and using its systems analysis tool, which uses OpenStudio and Energy Plus locally. One of the challenges that we have sometimes is when we let Revit automatically create the energy analysis model is that it considers the entire project, and the only filtering option really is phasing or the elements room bounding option, and both of those can be destructive in a typical Revit design and documentation workflow. So now we have an option, instead of doing the entire model, we can do the visible elements in the current view when creating the energy model. Here's an example of that, where this 2-story entry has been cropped down. And if I go into the energy settings dialog, there's an option here, use only elements visible in current view. So if I check this, and then I'll adjust these settings a little bit, just to get a little bit more refined results. And then I'll delete and then recreate the energy model. And there it is. So this really is a great troubleshooting opportunity. If there's a part of the model that's not getting created correctly, we can sort of narrow down the results and find out where the problem is. But also there could be a scenario where, like, this is an existing building and then this is a small addition with its own HVAC system. The next thing of the 3 things that I wanted to share quickly is the cloud file cache location, which can now be customized. So in the options dialog, there's the cloud model cache location. In the past, you could not set this, so any of your BIM 360 files that were synced locally could only be synced to your C drive. Sometimes laptops have a smaller SSD C drive and then a larger D drive, so it'd be optimal to be able to move the cache files to the D drive and not fill up your C drive. And then the last thing under Insert, if we're going to link a collaboration or a coordination model, there's a new option to link a coordination model directly from Autodesk Docs or BIM 360. I don't have a connection in Revit 2024 yet to BIM 360, but the thing that's particularly interesting about this is you can now, in addition to a large number of file formats, you can link Revit models. And if you link a Revit model or an IFC model or other certain types of models that have information associated with them, in Revit you can tab in and select those elements and see properties that are pertinent or available for that object type in the properties palette. And then the last most interesting thing about linking a Revit model as a coordination model from BIM 360 is not only is it a really lightweight model that you can snap to, but you can also link older versions of Revit that do not require an upgrade. So that really opens up a number of opportunities that'll be really interesting to see how people use it. So those are my 3 favorite new features in Revit 2024. Now we're going to take a quick look at some features related to sheets that are new in this version of Revit. If I open a floor plan view and right click, any views that have been placed on a sheet now have this option to open sheet. So that brought us to the sheet that view was placed on. Now I'm going to delete that view to show you another new feature. I'm going to select 2 views and 1 schedule and then drag them all onto the sheet. You can see they're not organized exactly how we might place them on a sheet, but they're not all stacked on top of each other, which is really helpful. And then at this point you could move them around and position them as needed. One other thing related to sheets, when a schedule is selected, there's now some properties. There were no properties in the properties when you'd select a schedule in the past. So you can rotate it, and then there's also some options here to compute and resize all the row heights. So there's an option here for all, and then image rows. Revit can now schedule revisions. Here's an example of a revision cloud on sheet A200. There's another revision cloud on a different sheet, and then one on a floor plan view. If I go to View, Schedules, and create a new schedule, you'll see there's the option to schedule revision clouds. So we can add the revision, and then in the Available Fields From section, we can select Sheets and pick from any of these options, such as sheet name, number. From views, we could select the view name and then select OK. So here you can see there's 2 revisions on sheets and 1 revision in a view. So this is a great opportunity for QA/QC or to create some other creative revision schedule in Revit 2024. 2 more quick things to share in terms of platform updates in Revit 2024. First I'll go into a family. All the family templates are the same, but one change in the family editor, if I create 2 filled regions, we now have the ability to select a filled region and use send to back, bring to front. The great thing about this is that this will now create a what you see is what you get all the time scenario. In the past, it might look one way in the family, a different way in the project, and then also print differently depending on if you're printing raster or vector. And then lastly, in the properties, both the instance parameters and the type parameters, all the project properties are now sorted alphanumerically. Family parameters are still sorted the same as before, but project parameters now are always sorted alphanumerically. Now I'm going to show you some features that are specific to the architectural discipline in Revit 2024. One that I really like, and a little biased because I was on the beta group that got to participate as a customer and comment on the progress of this feature, is this new Textures View Style mode. This is interesting. It's a cross between shaded views and realistic. So it's sort of consistent colors, but it's using the texture map and the appearance asset. You can still have shadows turned on. You can have ambient shadows turned on. It's just not using the global illumination to light the surfaces, which then tend to make the colors different depending on the orientation. So for certain presentation drawings, particularly plans and elevations, you can get some really interesting results. For example, in this exterior elevation, I'll set this to textures. And you can see it's a nice consistent look. I can turn on shadows. If we compare this to realistic, you'll see how the auto exposure in realistic tends to wash out the textures, and it takes quite a bit longer to load. So there's a pretty big difference there. Here's a quick convenience option that was added to Revit 2024. If we do a solar study, so we have it set to single day or multi-day, and then we select solar study, we see that the sun settings now present themselves on the ribbon, which are most of the settings in this traditional sun settings dialog. One other thing while we're here that is also new in 2024 is the option to do a time interval of 1 minute all the way down to 15 seconds. Previously you just had 15 minutes up to 1 hour. Then you can hit play and see the settings that you've set and the new time intervals. Now we're going to look at the big new feature for architects in Revit 2024. As I mentioned in my AECbytes article, this is both exciting and a little scary, just because it's such a big change, and firms are going to really need to spend some time understanding the workflow before upgrading projects or starting new projects in this version of Revit. So first off, we'll look at the Massing and Site tab, and Topo Surface, Building Pad, Subregion, those commands are completely gone in 2024. So here's an example of a file in 2023. It has a Topo Surface, it has a Building Pad, has a Subregion, and 2 site components that are hosted to the surface. And like most things in a new version of Revit, it'll preserve the data integrity and not automatically upgrade something. So we're going to select that 2023 file, and so the file will be upgraded, but it won't change it to this new object type. Right off the bat, we can see that it still looks the same. There's a subregion, it's a thin element with no thickness. But if we select it, there's no option to edit the surface. If we select the building pad, we do have the ability to edit boundary, and we even have the ability to copy a building pad and edit its boundary. However, on the Massing and Site tab, there's no command here for building pad, so you can't make a new one from scratch. There's no Topo Surface command or subregion. And as I mentioned, if you select the Topo Surface, there's no way to edit it, just an option to convert it to a Topo Solid. If we do that, you might take note of the things to consider here. Subregions are converted to Topo Solid. That's what we got here for this walkway or road. Building pads are ignored. Railings are rehosted. You have the option to pick the level and a family. So if this were your template and you were importing something, I suppose you could have some different types available. Otherwise, this is just an auto-generated one. Since this is a 2023 file we're opening, it's not going to have a 2024 Topo Solid family type in it. So we'll hit OK. And then the result is this new Topo Solid superimposed on the Topo Surface. It's not deleting the Topo Surface because the building pads aren't created. You might need that for reference. So you can see if I drag a window here, the building pad's there, which I'm actually just going to delete the building pad and the Topo Surface just to get that out of the way. And we can see what's created then. There's this somewhat more faceted surface. This type of element doesn't smooth things out quite the same way that a topo surface did. Also, the subregion is a solid. It really can't be changed to a different type. You can edit it just like a subregion before. And then you can also adjust its height. So this is really great, with one exception. Again, this might be hopefully a future improvement, but you can't do a negative number, which you might want to do for a road to show like a curb and gutter, for example. But nevertheless, you can select this thing, and then I'll just pick that darker colored material. You can see the site components are still hosted, and then if I select this, you'll notice that it has some thickness to it. If we wanted it to be thicker, because the building pad might be lower than the bottom of this solid, I'm going to go to Edit Type. And what you'll end up realizing here is that this is essentially the Revit floor command at a base level that's been repurposed to be a topo solid. And if I go to Edit Type, I can specify a material. Your inclination based on how the topo surface used to work would be to make this grass, for example. But this sort of gets to the problem of Revit not really being able to define the difference between a material and a finish. So really the material of the ground is earth. So when we cut sections through this or have cutaway views, the material of the ground will be correct. Oh, I guess I gotta go back in there. I forgot to adjust the thickness. So the variable thickness, just like a floor has, the bottom is flat, but the top can vary. And the top varies because sub-elements and points have been added. So again, that just shows how this is really the floor element at a code fundamental level that's been repurposed. And then the next step might be to make the top green. We go to Modify, Paint, and then I'll just pick this green. Well, let's see if there's a grass in here. Yeah, so the tricky part about the grass is you have to click and paint these different facets to get the top to be a different material. So now the last step is to add the building pad, and there's no building pad command. So the recommended workflow is to create a mass or an in-place family that can be used to cut something. So I believe this would work with just pre-created mass objects, which might be the easiest for a lot of people. But if you want to do something that's possible now with this workflow, is to have a sloped sidewall or even make a tunnel, we might use an in-place mass. We want to make sure when you're using mass in place, if you're not familiar with how this works, there's some challenges to it that you need to be aware of. So by default, it goes to this draw on face, which would make an irregular thing here that doesn't extrude easy because there's a bunch of irregular faces. So we want to switch this to draw on work plane, and you might even double check that work plane is set to level 1 or whatever level you want to be drawing on. And then actually I'll start out doing this off to the side because these lines actually somewhat get obscured by the site. I'll draw that off to the side. And the way this mass in place workflow works is it starts out by creating a 2D outline, and then you have to select it and create form. I'm going to Control Z and select that one more time, and more specifically create void. And then if we look at this from the side, we can pull that down so it goes through the ground. and then have this one be well above the top of the surface. And then here's the part that you couldn't do with the building pad, is start to have angled sides. So now, with this being the shape we want it, I can move it into place. And then before I finish this family, I'm going to use the cut command to cut the void to the surface and then finish. So it's a little bit more complicated in some ways, but at the same time it offers a more sophisticated result. Again, you could do a hole in the ground, so you're creating some sort of tunnel, for example. Now I'm going to go back to the site plan and show you how you'd create a site from scratch using this new workflow. Massing in site, topo solid. If you click the down arrow, you can do it from a sketch, or you can do it from an imported CAD file as you could in the past, or a CSV file. So create sketch. This workflow again is a little different than the way it used to work with the topo surface. You might create the perimeter first and then click finish. And then just so we can see what happens in 3D, we select this and go to add point. And then we can adjust the elevation. And there we have it. So that basically created a new topo solid. If we select the topo solid and go to edit type, the contour controls are now by type. So we click on this, and this is where we set the primary and the secondary contours. So we could do this on an element by element basis if we wanted to, rather than previously in Revit it was a global setting, and it also had the depth option, which was the fake depth because it wasn't really a solid. And then finally, if we want to add, if we select this first and then go to subdivide, this is where we could add what would be the equivalent of a subregion. And so this can be selected. You can specify a material, a height, and then you could also delete it, just like a subregion. And then after that, of course, the other commands work as normal. So we can place site components, contour labels, and that's it for a quick tour of the new topo solid command. Well, as you can see, there's a lot of great new features. I didn't share them all, of course. There's plenty of subtle ones and MEP and structural features that I didn't get a chance to show. But hopefully there's a little bit of something in there for everybody. If there's not a feature there that you're hoping for, be sure to head over to Revit Ideas and submit an idea or vote for other ideas that you'd want Autodesk to know to focus on in future releases. Again, subscribe to the YouTube channel below if you want to get updates on stuff I'm working on. Thanks for watching.